Lawyers of Reddit, what's the dumbest thing you've had to explain to a client? I once had to explain to a client that he could, in fact, fire an employee for 1. Stealing significant sums of money from the safe. 2. Pulling a gum on a coworker who questioned these activities. And 3. Waving said gum in a customer's face moments later. All of which were on camera. Why would he think he couldn't fire an employee for something that employee could be arrested for? An ill-informed sheriff's deputy told him firing the employee would violate his Second Amendment rights. That he hadn't really won a 20 million euros European super lottery from Australia that he'd never entered, and that it was a good thing that his family, bank and church wouldn't lend him the $2,000 they said they needed to verify his identity, on top of the several hundred he'd already sent them, and that yes, his priest was right, it was a scam. This was during a clinic at a free community legal center. The poor guy had limited English and only $20 left in his bank account, and he really did not want to let go of the 20 million euro dream. His priest had sent him to us for advice because he wasn't having any luck talking sense into the old guy himself and thought lawyers might help. That they had to pay me. This is more common than you'd think. For some reason. Some people think lawyers are like their personal spiritual guides or fairy godmother. A lawyer can't out and out lie. You said to them, yeah, I burned his ducking house down and pissed on the ashes. He can't say you were 2 states away. That blew some my students' heads. Interesting. So if a lawyer is hired for your defense, and your defense relies on an alibi that is crap, and you tell your lawyer, the lawyer has to change their defense strategy? Isn't that transparent to the prosecution? I recently had a call from a guy who found out that Long John Silver's was microwaving his baked shrimp combo. He wanted to eat there for every meal for a year and then sue them for false advertising. He changed his mind when I suggested that he would probably die of a heart attack before reaching his 1-year goal. That your boss sending you to a drug test after he walked in on you snorting coke off your desk does not qualify as entrapment. You cannot sue him. Well, from the other side, I once missed a court date and assumed that had put me in even deeper legal trouble. My lawyer then had to explain to me that dodging his calls to avoid being arrested was just dumb. And the exact wrong course of action. If it helps. We get it all the time. And the law profession is full of those with anxiety, depression, both issues that can make you want to avoid facing stuff. Personally, I totally get why my clients would avoid the shit out of their problems. I hate opening my mail but tell my clients on the regular not to avoid theirs. So your attorney didn't necessarily think you were an idiot. He would have just cringed at the hole he knew you were digging for yourself. I had to explain to a client why their ex-husband could travel with their child to Florida without obtaining a passport. As in, I had to tell them that Florida was part of the United States. Don't signal to the judge you need to use the restroom during your trial by making eye contact and vigorously nodding while urgently pointing at your crotch. My friend wants to know what the proper etiquette is if you need to use the restroom during the proceedings. Do you just shout break and run toward the door as fast as possible? Well, tell your friend that as the defendant. You should tell your lawyer and let her take care of it. You should definitely not make a break for the door. It doesn't matter if you were sober or not. You jumped out of a 3rd-story window with a beer bottle and threw it at a cop. The jury is going to think you were drunk. Also, I think you were drunk. Why they should not have called the cops to tell them exactly what they did that violated the restraining order. My colleague had a case where the client went over to the protected party's house. They weren't there. Then he called the cops and told them he was breaking the protective order. I once had to explain to opposing counsel that his entire argument was wrong because he had cited a statute for chattels not real property. It was a case involving a land contract. I used to be a legal aid lawyer, so sometimes I had sovereign citizens come in for help. I'd have to explain that their magic words wouldn't solve anything and they were going to get evicted. If they wouldn't agree to negotiate for settlement, I wouldn't represent them because they never had any real defenses and we didn't have the resources to litigate impossible cases. Edit, I get it. I said statue instead of statute. I'm useless on mobile and without my clerks, so this was a perfect storm. Also, I don't litigate anymore, so I'm fortunately done with sovereign citizens. I was contacted by a couple who had paid for a trip to see the midnight sun in northern Norway. They wanted to sue the travel agency when they found out it was the same sun as always. I had to explain that there's only a single sun, and that they can't sue a travel agency for selling a midnight sun trip. Every year one of the travel agencies publishes a list of the most ridiculous complaints they received. They're hilarious. Last year someone complained the beach was too sandy. Another good one was that they hadn't told the couple that a lot of beaches can be topless, and the husband became distracted. I had a client once who was in trouble for stealing sample medications from a hospital. We got security footage from the DA as part of the evidence, and when it came down we watched it together. The camera was literally 10 feet away in a well-lit room, and we watched her shovel prescription samples into a garbage bag and walk off. After it was done, she turned to me and asked if I thought she was going to be able to get off. I said no. I once had a client who wanted to declare bankruptcy. I explained he needed to have his tax returns for the past few years filed in order to do so. He said he hadn't filed taxes in 20 years because it ain't none of the government's business how much money I make. I don't understand. People make it sound like the IRS will throw you in a federal penitentiary if you ever dared not file taxes. But some guy can just not file for 2 decades and have nothing happen to him? Can someone explain to me how that is possible? Transactional attorney here. While from time to time I get folks that propose illogical things or things that are unhelpful to their clients. I did once have an attorney who did not realize that my client was the seller and his client was the buyer, which is funny enough. I talked with my client and we decided I should politely let him know that there may have been a misunderstanding in that regard. I did so privately and thoughtfully by email, but he declined to revise his comments, saying that he thought there were something like elements of a fair contract. No matter who I represent, although it seemed apparent they were especially fair to me, doesn't happen often. Not a lawyer, but processed a case where a woman sued her lawyers after a divorce because they didn't explain to her that divorcing her husband meant she'd no longer be married. From this week. Client: so I don't smoke meth. I think it's from unprotected sex. Me: so you would like me to explain to the judge it's okay? You just bang meth heads. Client: yeah. I had a mediation last week with a client on a really crappy case and managed to settle for a decent amount. I then explained to the plaintiff her share of the settlement after paying the bill. She was confused, so I explained that I was speaking about our fee and expenses. She got upset because we were taking her money. I had to explain what a contingency contract was and how we were compensated for our services. The conversation took a turn for the absurd when I had to explain I did not work for free. Not a lawyer, but I've seen multiple people basically ignore a notification for a court hearing. Then they end up asking for help a couple of days before they are due to attend. Given those types of people, the sky's the limit for stupid. Not a lawyer, but a friend of my dad once tried to sue him. Why? Because his dad, the friends, had died, and since my dad was like a father to his friend, he should give him money every month just like his dad did when he was alive. Apparently the lawyer just said that's not how it works. A little late, but every so often the thing goes around on Facebook where put up this copy and paste about how Facebook had to respect their privacy. The post says so. Any attorney knows full well that you can't unilaterally change a user agreement that way. Except this friend is an attorney. She passed multiple bar exams at the same time. On her first try. She's one of my references. And she posts that nonsense. Here's hoping it was early and she needed coffee. That it was not fiscally responsible to convert that 6-figure settlement check immediately and to instead put it into some sort of savings account, or something similar, for the benefit of your kids. Received call from bank 20 minutes later asking if it was okay to turn into $100s. By far and away the strangest thing I have ever had to explain to a client is how to use an elevator. Our courtroom was on the 4th floor. And she needed to take an elevator to get there. I had to describe how you get in. Push the 4 and then get out when the lights above show she's on floor 4. Yeah. The dumbest legal thing I've had to explain is that you can't terminate your parental rights voluntarily and then request visitation with that child. I went on a date with a lawyer recently who told me he had to be at work at 9 AM the next day to explain to someone that he could, in fact, be fired for killing someone with the company vehicle. Late to the party. But I'm a law student and I clerk at a big firm. I was in a partner's office when she took a phone call, in which she had to explain to a potential client that, yes, he did have to pay her if he wanted her to do the several hours of research that his question required. He was baffled as to why she couldn't spend a few hours looking it up and then get back to him with the information for free. I am a lawyer and I mostly don't touch this sheet on Reddit anymore because teenagers and drunks want to argue with no basis to do so. Fun to read though. A guy called up. He had 5 children with 5 different women. And woman number 5 was suing him for support. This would change his withholding from work 77% instead of 62%. He was also jobless and let out of jail for felonious non-payment of child support on woman number 2. The best job a felon can hope for is like $10 an hour. Capping his pre-tax earning potential around $2.33 an hour. If he can get hired as a felon. This was especially troubling, as he had no way to support his new girlfriend, who was pregnant. He asked me, "What can I do?" "I don't know. Stop ducking women without protection would be a start." I have to explain to clients on a daily basis that yes, you do have to actually pay for that house you are buying. If your mortgage company hasn't given us the money yet or you didn't arrange for them to give enough money, then you cannot pay for house and house is not yours. And no, I cannot give you keys to house before it is yours. Not the dumbest, but the one I have the most problem with is attorney-client privilege. It's only a secret, and safe from discovery from the other side, if you keep a secret. Don't forward my emails to other people. Don't talk about your case. Keep it a secret. That my advice that you would not test positive for marijuana given that you last smoked 3 weeks ago assumed that you wouldn't smoke again between our discussion and you taking the test. Had to explain to a client's mother that just tell them he didn't do it wasn't going to be a winner for us at trial. And we did actually need her help. I had to go to court over a ticket once. The whole procedure was very orderly. Except for the guy immediately before me, who was charged with drinking in the public way. ACA. Public intoxication. He spent half an hour arguing, at the emphatic denial of his own lawyer, that he was innocent because he was drinking on a bench that was next to the sidewalk, and therefore was not in the public way. Maximum fine for him. Friends. Hypothetically, before going into a negotiation for a divorce separation agreement, I sat down with my client. We set clear, specific goals for officiation, spousal support, etc. In the negotiations, I exceeded every goal. We got more money than she told me she would be willing to settle for, more visitation custody, and every one of the little particulars she wanted in the way of personal and real property. Total victory. Conceded to by the opposite party. A few days later, she hypothetically called me up and said, "He's such an asshole. I want to drag this through the courts." It took a while, but I finally explained to her that we had already won. It was time to move on. And going against our signed agreement now would probably result in a less favorable outcome to her than what we had already achieved. No. You dingus. Self-defense does not mean he punches you in the face and then 2 weeks later you go to his house, ring his doorbell, and kick the shit out of him. I had to argue against someone who claimed to have copyright law on their side for the opening of Bach's Cantata No. 140, Watch It Off Guard. A pop instrumentalist arranged Bach's masterpiece then claimed it as his own. After I played the original, There was zero doubt in the courtroom regarding who was the master and who was the imposter.